Jeff, is it on? Okay. On and off. I can't see it. So please go ahead and ask any questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my question is, how can we help the Samaya breaker? Obviously, they're headed for a catastrophe that they're not aware of on some level, and they're overcome with negativity. So is there anything, we who know that something's happening, what can we do to help them?
the social rang danse chong shao shenda danse nyapa chinduna de la petopage chu tap kanre
다 대다 펜 토버 탑 대다 히랍고리 히랍 파르봄데 조랑 그 간르예메 히랍고리 히랍도 뭐 말한 게 담세 제 찬양도 대선 로건도 삼들이나 대저 자마소야다 대타월이 소소소소 그 어디 대타월 시토그리 많지 그 나랑 뭐니 시토그리 매 예바르다 깨자히 그 뭐니 시게 유다미 대 조랑 그 respect for so the muzo chepa yori Then 저 코란 소라 사바된 긴기 치미 바르게 거니 제 란동 자와니는 메와를 인동 코란 소라 피생도 돈이 계자 란투나 드르게 차 칸도 드르게 드르인 사리 저 란투 제테스테사 드르히데 자 터핑 토나 야보리 가시온 피마토 파로보데게 제조고도 뭐니로 마지 respect for so 마즈나 대라 컨트롤 상야 요 말이나 다당의 피마서나 나랑 견다다 마음바다 핀 토지를 용어를 효 삼내를 삼바삼보 그 거동 넘버다고 하는 원 남다리 차 되니까 장기니 그 동생 찬양 소원답지 나랑 기포토도 용어를 좀 예샤트 라마 도르진 좀 라소보다 되니 자불라마로 소란데 되니 소소고 샤브장 인제 돈다 랑도 니가다 샤브장 칸타 좀 세튼 되니 디게와 그 또테게랑 기니가 핀토세그로
Well, first of all, in a situation like that, you need to exercise discernment. While it is relatively easy for us, in most cases, to recognize our own impairment of samaya, and provided that we're willing to admit it, relatively easy for us to purify it, it's sometimes hard to know how another person would receive your input in such a matter. They may or may not respect your intentions and your advice if you approach them directly. If you advise the person and they don't acknowledge or respect the validity of what you're saying, you have to be prepared for that and not become angry. So you cannot be personally invested in the outcome of whatever discussion or intervention you engage in. If the person does not accept your advice, then the best thing you can do is to make aspirations for their benefit, for their future purification with the purest of intentions. At best, this would mean trying to, in your own practice of Padmasambhava and Samaya confession, to think that you're purifying not only your own violations and impairments, but also those of the other person as well.
yang gare ke so de ngag samsung ya de ke chimbori rang ran da ho ja ya de ke che gare yang rang ran la ke me me cha sa re ngara I'm always a right sound of mambo re de re ma so ngara ka ngara ke khata se ya de so chia na ke chia de ran se rang ke khata se ya de ya khyu re ngara ni ba jong do ka da no thor song do ka da san no thor la ke ni de ni ba de yu ya da 당체的下降位头按当波那个按当波的他老兵这样的这刚带娘的这样的按当波的的谁的
The most important thing is to guard our own minds. And guarding your own mind really means being willing to look at and admit your faults when you are at fault. And some people can't do that. Some people have the attitude, I'm always right. And when someone has the attitude, I'm always right, then not only are they inaccessible to anyone else's advice, because they'll have a way to deflect it, but they're actually inaccessible to their own scrutiny, because they've replaced their capacity for self-awareness with dogged and rigid belief in their own infallibility. So the most important thing for us is not to become like that.
Question. And then, well, Travis has a question online. So the last section, when you were discussing not holding grudges against somebody who is caught, somebody you don't like, but there's a reason why you don't like them, right? Because they betrayed you, or was that two separate things? Like if somebody betrayed you, it can be one thing to forgive, and then where is the kind of like, there's no trust, right? If somebody has betrayed you, how do you kind of protect yourself from this person? Because, you know, it's futile. I mean, you can forgive until the cows come home, but, thanks.
Shenda ke rangi din kota dupu kode karo kapsirina so ne Kongtrol kunze mazo zopa ko inchi chena maoba ganza de zaza zo ganza de ke tinchi ram korwai korna de maoba korsik Dona de zopa ganza de chickens shut up until the chongo
대 말이 대리 실험만도 놓고 뭐저 퍼센트 카다 실험을 거든지 실험이나 퍼센트 뭐 조부상제 토벌 먼저로서 실험도 퍼센트 뭐 로에다 거든지 양 참서도 꼬박에서 봐나 이게 실험이나 용거를 조박에 양 선적으로 그안 종세야도 조가베데 조검도 조바가 삼노도 임페를 삼노도 거다 삼나 야 라디니까 요리지 차차다 대 퍼센트 카데라 실업도 고소 대인데 실업도 든 남용고 고래도 실업도 오늘 도그나 그 표도 줘봐대 실업 다다 손만하게리 버릇만 하대 실업도.
That's actually a very important point, because in the exercise, essentially what you're talking about is how to intelligently practice the perfection of patience. In other words, how to cultivate forgiveness without making yourself, without placing yourself at risk, in this case, of repeated betrayal. And this brings up, this is an important question, because it brings up the more general point that any of the other 5 perfections, generosity, ethics, patience, diligence, and meditation, must, for the reason you indicated in the question, always be accompanied by discernment, the 6th. When we cultivate forgiveness for someone, that doesn't mean suspending reasonable caution and taking care of ourselves, protecting ourselves. As you indicated in your question, there is a distinction between forgiveness and heedlessness. So it's important to be to forgive, but to remain, but to exercise discernment.
Right, and then there's the question of would that be in the category of skillful means, sort of like not enabling, like not sort of, expecting that person to change necessarily, and just, I mean, trust once it's gone, it's really hard to get back. So is there like a pathway back to trust, let's say? Like,
the mission that run Nepal Tama, run the Paropo de la Yichi Maris, running the Yichi Maris. Number Chitina, Yimichipa de Zapa Kongtrol Garawa Marite, in a Maombala Ganza de Carizone, Yichi Tabachi Yomake Talam Yeri. And Paropo, Nala Dupo Tomina, Na Paropo, Dopazakis, Regime, the Dopa Mazaji, Yichi Yonjoke, Taka.
다 대대 당원의 히랍고들이 히랍 조직 대라고들이 다 파로보드 마상이 파로보드 그 zubai 격감 이감 som감 교랑게 대라 강 땅이야 교랑게 핀토게 삼바를 삼바삼보 그 콜라 계자히야다 삼바삼보게 탑다 히랍세는 파로보드 다테서 understanding 거 하고도 삼들이나 교랑 이치 거 제거리 이치레거리 다른 모두는 그 교란의 예지미 교란 조건 세컨도 처럼 핀다 그 사마지한도 대피센도 그 하고 마탐나 간다량 모름르자 간탑탑 삼노동 히라부터니 바로 보데 양도 못잡자라인 그 상방이 맞자 대절레반의 용의 조선들이나 대대로 잡잡시야리 마도 제게 대라 이치랩 타야를 교란다 제 omnation 라워다 탐라워리 송나리 마도 지금 마초가 나와도니 바로 볼 때라 이치랩거나 레라오케가 랩토가 말이 코카레세나 마초가 저 토끼르가 저래나 다콜라 토오데 마제나 토메와기 이치가 저 랩토가 말이 대라 잡잡소야리 마도 대야나게리 대라 데스 히라부터 잡잡소 then 마음바 핀토데 핀다니데 누기네 양의 인기 캠보 공제는 다 대다 콜레지 기포 가포 용이고 거기 강다량디 컨트롤다 해당 예는 뇌생의 체원들의 잔 산적의 샘을 그 유지에 터표 상네 야 뭐미야 보자 테스트세야 그 캠보를 마도 저기 예치자자자 랩토야나 가래어서
Well, again, this is a case where you have to exercise discernment. And the discernment in this case comes into the outcome of your exercise of patience. If through your exercise of patience you are being forgiving to the person, they seem to understand, which we would say means they seem to get it, which means that they acknowledge their betrayal and are prepared to do better, then there is a road to trust. There is a way, a gradual way to trust. Although even in such cases, you should not be too quick to put yourself in harm's way. But if, as often happens, the behavior or the attributes that cause that person to hurt you or betray you, whichever it was, are not changing, if the person doesn't get the fact that they did something wrong, is unprepared to admit that to themselves and therefore not to you, then you have to continue to be careful not to place yourself at risk, not to put yourself in a position where they can harm you, because you're not helping them by letting them abuse you. You're not, it is allowing oneself to be abused by others is not the practice of the place of. It's the practice of a fool. if you were an omniscient Buddha or a Mahasiddha, it would be different. Omniscient Buddhas know exactly what someone is going to do, so they don't need to consciously exercise discernment. And Mahasiddhas can transform any situation into a benefit. So they'll put themselves in risky situations. But for anyone else, for anyone like us, you really have to take care of yourself. You have to protect yourself. And unfortunately, Lama said, there are people who are toxic. And you have to deal with a toxic human being the way you deal with a poisonous snake. You don't hate a poisonous snake. It is what it is. But you also don't put yourself at risk. You don't think, well, maybe it's not poisonous, or maybe it won't bite me, or maybe its poison glands malfunctioned when it was growing and it's fine, and maybe it'll be okay, and then reach out to pet it. You don't put yourself in risky situations, and that's the way you have to be with someone who has repeatedly, and he used the term repeatedly and consistently demonstrated toxic behavior. So in that case, the best thing you can do is pray for them. Pray that they grow out of their toxicity.
자가 본인은 자가가 가서 산재 혁자도 봐 손도 가서 뭔가 브라더 라고서 거다 거기 따벌 산재라 갑대 때고 때 산재가 따벌 조금 거때 얘는 산재 거 있죠.
라고
맞는데
레전드
거 있죠. 산재 거. 이 산재가 있지면 마도 겐도 인다가 거 있죠. 그 산재가 조금 받아 콜라 탄 코랑 오래 맞았거든. 산재를 조금 요리 삼바오리 닝게오리 콜라 핀상 기어데 콜 산재가 콜라 그 나라 야포시 그 서시 코디 삼니게 그 나가 깨자데 understand 코디 삼니게 이치오 and there na yega buda in guru rinpoche kapsa duno tara ko zone sanye yabu tazon de duno che tapang guru rinpoche ka de guru rinpoche ke desola pinsang samba sambo ri gangdar yang de la dokya sin ke dikhin guru rinpoche de o mare de ena guru rinpoche jin guru rinpoche ke yabu tazon de la ngone ke chimitse wan ko ne kapsa la Guru Rinpoche, be careful for Kong Zabzab Jimato, Kong Sani Torana Parchizo Carison, Yichi Mevata to the Don, Riana, de Tata and Jackson, then again.
They can't sutras.
Did the Tata, the Ronda, Yabotason, the Parchis, or Chimitse, one Topgyal Marwa.
They say you must have a long.
They are not getting Guru Rinpoche, the Soda Tata Dela. Pinsam Samba Sambo, the Yichi, the Dugger.
Yichi American, sorry.
Trisong, Yichi means tomorrow.
Yichi making the Taralogon or something, Trisong, that's
Maritara the Gon Yicho.
Oh, Yichi.
Yicho, Tara the Gondamba, Gangtaria, Hoke, called Parchitam, the direct Dela, Kazi Zogonvena. 이치께 못하고 이치야 매와 중세들이 대로 레도 가래라 교랑게 이치께서 여러 지리요 말이 대도 삼바의 인지 공자리마도 이치께 제야데 제 타고만 있어요.
One of the issues in repeated betrayal may be that because we've been talking about whether to trust the betrayer. But one of the issues may be that the betrayer has a fundamental distrust or mistrust of you. And I say that with two historical examples in mind. One is the Buddha's, it's not really brother, but they say brother. Anyway, close male relative.
Oh, cousin.
cousin Rao, the kind of half brother, the half brother, you know.
That's what his brother,
Yeah. Anyway, Devadatta. Devadatta was the Buddha's, usually they say cousin, sometimes brother, but I don't mean to make it sound like something, you know, cousin, brother, sister, wife, and all that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about this country. Sorry. But he was probably the Buddha's cousin, as we would use the term. Devadatta, because of precursors in previous lives, just had it in for the Buddha. Everything the Buddha did, and the Buddha, long before he was the Buddha, long before he achieved awakening, but from their childhood, Devadatta was so jealous of Prince Siddhartha, the Buddha, that everything Siddhartha did, no matter how benevolent it was, Devadatta saw as malicious. And so Devadatta would always find something to do to undercut anything the Buddha tried to do, and eventually tried to assassinate him 3 times. The point is that even there was somebody in the Buddha's immediate family that even he couldn't reach. He couldn't reach even the Buddha, who was the embodiment of beneficence, could not convince or prove the goodness of his intentions to Devadatta. There was simply nothing he could do. A similar case of this was when Guru Rinpoche was in Tibet. Among the ministers of the Tibetan king who were antithetical to Buddhism, one was called Tara Lugong. And this isn't the Sanskrit name Tara, it's Tibetan Tara, it's different. And Tara Lugong was, like the other ministers, he was a nationalist. He felt that the Tibetan monarchical, spiritual, religious theocracy, which was predicated on the Buddhist religion and Tibetan national identity, was threatened, and therefore his own position as a noble minister were threatened by the king accepting a foreigner, an Indian, Guru Rinpoche was Indian, as his guru. And so he constantly tried to do stuff to Guru Rinpoche, and he tried to kill him several times, tried to do all kinds of things. In fact, the text that Lama's teaching, if you go back to the very beginning, the setup for the setting of the text is one of these assassination attempts by Tara Lugong. And Guru Rinpoche assuring Trisong Detsen, don't worry. Yeah, I got this. It'll be okay. And finally, the probably the worst effect that Tara Lugong had was when Guru Rinpoche was about to give Trisong Detsen a long life empowerment that would have kept him alive longer and would have, one thing leading to another, altered the course of Tibetan history for the better. Tara Lugong convinced him not to receive it. And therefore, Trisong Detsen didn't, and he died in the age of around 60. And, the dynasty, what's called the imperial dynasty of the great Dharma kings ended by the end of the middle of the 9th century. And, but just like the Buddha, Guru Rinpoche's intentions were pure, but there was nothing he could do to overcome the paranoia and the actually racist nationalism of Tara Lugong. who just saw Guru Rinpoche as a ambitious foreigner trying to get a foothold in a southern state. And it's just so, his point is that there's just sometimes there's just nothing you can do.
I have some questions on what I want to ask one first.
Thanks, Lama. Really wonderful teaching. Amazing. So I have a kind of a follow-up question to what Andrea asked. Yesterday, it was just briefly mentioned in integration of the view and conduct. So, as you know, I work in a place that's really hard place to work in. And I feel oftentimes that I'm really in the deep end and I should be in the shallow end. And
Well, let me check, because he's probably going to get most of what you say, but he won't get the colloquialism, so let me translate that. Deep end, shallow end, the pesha ninsong tori
or
that don't know wrong leka lesa the ngane chunan the jinsa ro ninsong ro ninsong mun so what so kera do shoot the New York. Okay.
so, oftentimes I'm not exactly sure what the right thing to do is. And you know, as much as possible, I try to rest in the view, but I'm very early in this. And so not only do I lose that view
Very early, so they don't know why.
often, I have confidence because of my gurus and because of the teachings in my innate wisdom. But, and I want to gain confidence in that. And I guess my question is, how, I don't exactly know how to ask this, but how to integrate that with the conduct in my life. Now, I understand that I'm really, very low down on the path, or very far back on the path. So I understand that there are rules to check myself with. Like you can look at the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva. So then you can check yourself. You can say, oh, okay, that seems right. That I'm going in the right direction. But I guess, and this is something that I've wrestled with, is how to gain confidence in wisdom that doesn't come from this sort of very narrow view of consciousness.
The Tawadan Chupa Zonju, Kasong de Somala. Tawadan Chupa Zonju Jopa Kola, the Morong, the Namachitana Morong, Ledapo Paris. Yisana Morong, the Yunda Leka Lesa, the Ne Supo, the Pores, Zongkong, there's Tapoda. Da morang tawala yichis. In yichi yapa te tso the lama namba togon. Yichi yapa dampe chu demba yapa. Yichi gone morang semchi nelo the yichi yapa. Yichi yana jeto kapsa the lega kapsa the ne the kadaki nelo munsum. That Chalam ke Kolayana, Jesse Lalen to the Manos of Chalam Chomwa ke Tashi, Temple, Chum, hang up on the road. So Tawa Chalonda, Tawa Dini, Severe Tat, Zundu Chawa Tat,
Redate, so de Chora, Tampechu the Yichi, the Lama Menga the Yichi Yopateta, the Demba Yopatela, Yichi Yopate, Tawamon Tubali, Tawak Teni, Ben Halebari, Taylor Yeti Totini, Teni Lam Gombata, Juba, Devating, and the Jurjak Salam Nasana Tonde. Tatela Tesare Langa and Rolika, the Kangar Tesa Yori, the Kangar Yuna, or Nan the Kangar Yude, Kangar Delatin, Narana Mamba, and Devering to you, some Nirake, the Yichite, you Nibachi, Tazuk, Kongtrol, Yalamatanjika, Tabitone, Sonda, Chile Yichi, what they get, send the Popata. Nyingpo hale pa ke ti to gari nyingpo de la ti no ne kyo pa de ni ta wa de da kyo pa de ni pa ya da ma so di po pa di to de ni sung jo be ne kan to to ko ni de nya ni ko ba po de na hale pa ke sem na ya ji da nyam yong da nyong wa chok chen bo le ko de ti ni ka le sim ji ke to na ka chi le na ka ngan me pan ra wo Zugum Tapano, Yonko, Tata Chanaka, the Naga, and Guanyo, Jatan, that's on Kan, Chatan Yapo Marite, Dena, Arizon the muscle, Hal Lepaka, Manmato, Matujano, that means a drama or Tata, Yulam drama, Denani, they keep on my embark. Zak na cha jo sun le ba ke ta are ro ke zo to de no chuk chen bo le ha wo ju je le jin bi le de che ke na no pu ba ja ja dong ma ta ji kan ya se ya me wa ro de che ke mu gu ma do ja ja o de sa bu de che ke ju ya me de o de zo ko no ta ti ba le ka le ko ha le ba ke ka le ko no so ke de che ke se ke le ka le ni zo ko myo ma ri这他们就说你电视就讲为嘛用这鸟人嘛，他们就没得吃呢，没得话他没得这些个就把他呢，就讲为呢来干来呢年轻，旁边的个就讲为能做的的搞来考虑的，他到的就是老年人上班难的，没头的就讲为没头的就讲结果为的那个平个嘛的得了希腊个，看着过很多的得了平时上班的。대다 탑도 싫어하고 그 성적인데 간도 그것도 단을 봐 남편도 돈을 내가려나 근데 탕마랑아라 탕치 마서 그러니까 탕치죠 탕치 마서 돈이 되니 내가려나 가래가는 대버린 경주 용을 받는 게
Well, while you, to some extent, disclaim or qualify your recognition of you as based on truth, by saying it's based on trust in the truth of your Guru's wisdom and the truth of the Dharma, that in fact is the authentic recognition of the view, because it's only the true basis for authentic recognition. Anything other than that will be intellectual and therefore inauthentic. As it is the authentic recognition of the view, it is therefore also the basis of the path. So as far as that's concerned, you're all set up. Still, the path, including the path of post-meditation, is difficult. There's no way to avoid that. But what may help is to recognize that the difficulty is itself the means through which the path is traversed. The difficulties you experience are not obstacles to the path. They are the path. And because the only way we can grow on the path is through developing courage. The courage to remain in the view, even under difficult circumstances. We cannot develop courage unless our courage is being tested. Only through that courage can we come to develop authentic experience. And through that skill that will eventually render you and all of us impervious to circumstances and able to help others no matter what. Now, I recognize, having said that, I recognize that your workplace is a little bit extreme. Like everyone else, I've heard lots of stories about Rikers Island. I know that there are people incarcerated there who use their incarceration to sell drugs. I know that there is somewhat uncontrolled violence among the inmate population. And I know finally that there is what amounts to almost mass incarceration of those who are in fact not criminals but mentally ill. So, yeah, there's that. Most of us couldn't tolerate working for even a day in that environment. But by being able to do this day after day, as tough as it is, your progress will be all the swifter. And because it's no fun at all, your progress will be pure. It will not be corrupted by self-gratification. The only thing I would add to that, he said, is you have to make sure that you don't burn out. If you burn out, and you know better than I how easy it would be to do that, if you burn out, then that could become an obstacle. But the hardship of working there itself is the path and not an obstacle.
Thank you.
Can I ask another online question then? Okay, so Travis would like to thank the Lamas again for teaching. And his question is, what do those of us living in cities sharing water sources with hundreds of thousands or millions of other people can do to prevent / purify Samaya corruption?
Travis Tashi Lomba chick, Chuo Chigi, Chu Tomat and Chela, Zaza, Danyam, Chuo Chick is Tona, the so circuit, that's it, is. Then not okay, Roger Temple, Deacon Sola, Chuo the Roger Chazan, Chuo Chick is. Korangi Desa, Roger, another, the Nitamara Mopoyo. Ten the not circuit down that going up, done that day. Not circuit down six, we don't want you to so you car. Kasaka, they in the Karazo.
That day, the Manjukon Nambaka, Sombana Yavik, and the Lombaka Chatomero say that the good cup they do, top the theory. Then is also the Tamsenian Chandra, Nyangum, or the Hukimbo, Tandrika Tswana Kamin, Chok, Trako, Jerry, so Tijan the Desare, Yadanta, Jerem Tanhati, Desare, Samo Yabor, Tom, then Pala, Samo Nanto, Hasam Majan, the weekend, that and then the Lombard and the Lombardic Chantom, Nikamari. It's in the Galia Cavalry, Tata Sombanangiri, from Church Chachang Vitzarori, then the Jundosa, Yamdosa, Komdosa, Kao Mari, Damya, Siri, Mia Siri, Kandaya, Soso Gatuja, the Mepala, then Soso Vietnam, Jeremy Yabotan, Lama Sonda Yabotan, Adeju Yabosin, the Gina, Chutajo.
Well, as you cited in your question, the instruction is do not drink water from the same valley as someone who has broken Samaya with your Guru. Of course, that's easy to do in a relatively unpopulated country like Tibet, where populations are isolated, communities are identified, and so on. Living as you do in a large city, you're drinking water, you're drinking city water, and you have no control over who else lives in that city. Two things you can do. First of all, if you observe no signs or evidence in your experience of Samaya contamination, such as the symptoms that were described yesterday, then whoever is there, it's probably not a problem for you. The second thing is always try to maintain the generation stage in post meditation. Out here, and recite the deity's mantra, and that will protect you.
I have one more question on Marina asks, first she says, online participation is a positive new development that Buddhism has adjusted to in modern times that has bridged the gap of distance for many of us who have not had the chance to train in these sophisticated practices. With its profound symbolic rituals such as the Vidyadhara or the Shamatha practice at KPL, directly from a skilled Lama, at a proper Vajrayana Dharma center. My question is about doing assembly practice from a distance, guided by knowledgeable, skilled Lamas as a remedy for soak of a particular puja. Will it also work for our local deities, or should we make some particular physical offering for local deities? Given the main subject as a person, I'm not a little confused. It's also an opportunity to learn. Sorry, messages coming. Marina is continuing from my question. Can Lama comment on doing online assembly practices with soak offering? If we make offerings at KPL and participate online, or advise if there's anything specific to do.
Okay, that was pretty confused.
Yeah.
So I'm going to
as
decide.
a remedy.
Hold on. I'm going to condense the question. Otherwise, we're going to be beating about the bush forever.
Okay.
So the question I'm willing to ask him is, if we are participating in a KPL Soak Puja from a distance, what offerings do we need, if any, do we need to have? And the reason I'm going to ask it that way, and I'm not asking if I can ask it that way, I'm telling you.
Okay.
And the reason I'm going to ask it that way is because it's going to cut through a lot of other blocks.
Gotcha. There's one thing I just finished with, because it was in reference to Samaya. So she said, as a remedy for breaking Samaya's Samaya contamination, not soak.
Oh, previously she talked about soak. So these were several successive messages?
Well, because you can't, it won't let you have to do it separately, like it only allows so many words.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's a little fragmented, so
Okay.
just bear with us here.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
The Marina Discourse. Chino the Kongtrol ke Jamgon ne Zoom down YouTube kaya internet ke tope ngapso nyam the samsung so and sechu the nyanga ke kaso Kongtrol KPL malat na Kongtrol namna de shidu the Guru sechu down Kongtrol ke sepanyanga ke so nyam the dongyu. Nyam the dongyu kaso de kola tewa nido. Sietong KPL rangne chepa chesamo shamu. So namle de nyam the dombayana chepa katsu shamu. Chepa shamju nam de najinge de pacheke shedake to kato down geto down de zagiti mo bodhisam down le labozona chepa katsu shamu. So they cheat. Nisana, the so the John Rinpoche, the channels of Matsa Teacher, the Nyangata, the Kosa, Danse, Nyamcha, Shapa, the Jorgis, the John Nyamata, they are progress. They do it, they need it. So,
Tadele Zauri, Tambo Yanka Terena, Chepar Yomaris, Sentanya Wakila, then it's all dead. Sentanya what the kitchen body, Yantare Mare, Mazok, Shankam Drame, Bani Lama, the bomb, Koratami, Jin, and Soja, Sombon, Soja, Holocaust, Jin, in Chuban, because it is all that young body of Kajari, Yen, Yawadi, or the rain and body of Kajari. Nazo Gachi 13, the Chezo Nazo Pajin, so they got a sort of color coordinate and research. They are okay. Then so Dachara, so Tanya and Kanyu, and some Donja de Kipari, some Tonya de Kipari, then the Lama Lama Tugin and Lison, the Lama Tanya and Yomari, so Sentanya, the Lama Ranga Kambala, Yorimato, Yin, Yomar, and Gurumoti, Soma, Nagiri. Then the Chokgyur Lingpa, the Keransoka Kati, Xiangjiang Chok Tang, Xington Rao, the Chojek Kati Yoba, the So Xiang, Mira, or some Kantata Mira, Xiang, Torma, Wun, Chori, Min, Xington Xiang, Demena, Choje, Ze, Kan Yu, Tangjing, Asoka, Tujan Xiang, the Jitana Gang, Derma Gang, the Kati, and Xiang, Medo Xiang, Chuba Pordula, then Asoka and Chuba Pordu. That in Chuba, the Natsok, Namdo, Kahana, or the Don Sa Korang or Jacko Korang or the Jigmado, Kaha, the Yomari, then the Lukin Natso Tonkolin, the Gond and the Panayam, the Dondori, then the Sosa, the Yam, the Sandolari, or Monanyam, the Sindro, Trakinyam, the June Rodri, then he thinks on the night child.
then so Pasha into Yola Shida Chidas the Maranga the Dopazaji Chick Yola Natsa Ina the Chida Carter Cham the Tonga Lumpa Degi Shida La Tongas. The Moranga the Par Arizona Ravala then Nyanda Dana the Arizona Shida the Natsa Carter Boma Chagaway. The Morang so Tombo with this.
They don't undergate the Madonna side Lama Tema Chipari, Kahala Yomar Arzana side Lama, Zoga side Lama Tema Sadakata Yidam Bersala. So Zena, more Jigwagana, Choker, Nama Tadivagana, then he got to Jatan, the Chu Jamatan, the Chahi, Chu, Dona Chu, Gator Jatan, the Chu Jamatan, Gator the Chuneta, Kalakanogi Jamne, More Chori. Then he told my Yenda Chetin, the Jatan, Chuja Matana, Tepsinana, Tata, Sington Rota, Coquino, then I get Mazatan Sana, then I get Jabuda, Dronati, Chu, Mipetin, Chechomi, some of the Rizzo Sangre, they Chitula, and Jacobi. They may not so think the Sega, some Mupate Chitula, Mupateka. Number 2 Jorokom was a car party about charcoal money, they think it's not.
Yes. Then you put the John Rinpoche, the dancing, Yamcha Kong Lodro Thaye. So the John Rinpoche and Yam when they come but cheap, come make cheap on the song, so my bucket. John Rinpoche, the Donna. Did something chocolate on them, Moranga dancing, Yamcha John Hingers.
Senior John paint up it, and Senior just same Jango, there is same Jorang, same Tito, and Nazok same Jake and Disney choker, the end Jorang same Nani, Dazuti, Gareson Yubati, Tot and Soso, Senam, Soso, the Tanzanian Jatamji, Samotan, Hyak, Kodri, the Lord of Dawa Hata Sama Carisona, Tatela, Ta near Ranga, Nazok Tanzania. So that then Tamse Jade, Tamse Chanya the Kahari, the thing Aranga Senani Shabian, which is all in the Jada, Zorio Mari, then the Charanga son of the Reton in Shadula, Shabian, young Tabaki.
So putting all of that together and trying to incorporate as many bits and pieces of that question as possible. Starting with general issues and then going to the particulars. Well, first of all, distance doesn't matter. Given that you are able to coordinate the timing of your participation using the internet so that it is simultaneous, the fact that you are not in the room but several thousand miles away is actually irrelevant. If you think about it, when we do these practices, we are inviting deities from all kinds of realms, and we invite them all simultaneously. We don't give those from realms we imagine as farther away a heads up or early start so that they can make the journey, and then invite those who are closer to time, and so on. None of that kind of coordination, which would be necessary where we're dealing with physical distance, none of that kind of coordination is necessary. So in the same way as practitioners, the fact that you are doing the practice in your home in Arizona doesn't make you in fact, doesn't place you at a distance. It actually makes no difference. Therefore, ultimately speaking, the offerings that are presented at KPL are sufficient. Now, he returned to that a little later, so we'll come back to that. The fundamental principle here is that the Guru's compassion, as is often said, is beyond distance. The Guru's compassion is as present in any place as it is in any other place. Now, with regard to if you're going to chant the puja along with us, but in a distant location, do you have to set up separate offerings? And if so, which ones do you have to set up? The issue such as, or the offering, the preliminary terma, white terma to local deities that's offered here, does that count when you're 3,000 miles away or not the local deities different, and so on? He answered these things. With regard to the offerings, that you're talking about pujas that include soaps, what you would call soap, a feast. So just offer what you can. So put out some fruit, something edible, soaps. If you can, in your shrine, set up Amrita, Radha, and Torma. If you don't have or can't make the Torma, then you can simply put cookies instead of the Torma. If you can offer the flowers and other things in the offering bowls, that's good, if you can. And then when you get to the part of the tsok where everyone here eats the tsok, then you eat your tsok. And then you conclude the ceremony, the puja, as we concluded here. Now, with regard to the preliminary white torma for the local deities in particular, there are two ways of looking at it. First of all, the primary recipient of that torma is the goddess of the earth. And since since Arizona is at least technically on the same planet as we are here, then it would definitely count. So if your question is, does it count? Yes, it counts. However, if you would feel better offering a white torma together at the same time in your home or your room, or if you can't do that, a cookie or something like that, go ahead. There's no problem with excess or redundancy. Similarly, when you come to the protector offerings, which are present on the Guru Rinpoche days, it's the three principal protectors of his cycle, and on the Dakini days, it's her principal protector. You can offer termas if you have them, or if not, a cup of tea or cookies or whatever you want. The point is that he said that since all the offerings, whether over there or even here, are fundamentally just focal supports for our visualization of far greater offerings than we could hope to have physically present, the amount or extent of the physical offering is largely immaterial. It can serve as a focal support in either case. Now, with regard to the purification of samaya, inasmuch as the purpose of the 10th and 25th day pujas that you're talking about is the purification and renewal of samaya, then your participation in them from a distance is as valid and effective as the participation of anyone who was present in the shrine room here at KPL. But that brings us to the point that samaya is fundamentally an individual thing. So even though we gather in groups to confess it and fulfill it, each person has to do it for themselves. Each person's samaya is their own responsibility. So whether you are doing it in your own private practice without anyone else participating, or you're doing it together with a group of other people at KPL here in New York, or you're doing it over there in Arizona, it's basically your own individual responsibility to purify your own individual samaya.
Yang Magenda Tamjik, Tata, Nyereo Samari, Internet, and Nazamak, Paton, and Risari, Nana did Kasari, some Nisana, do young Kebe, no young Kime or Charles Sibara, the same Marongas, and Yakol of the Peru, Mama Tambe or the Buddha, Kandor said, Samyene, Tata Janani, Haishan, Jintan, Haishan, Gomya, Pizza, His, Mikisonam, Goma, maybe he's so Gomja, this, then say he's. Songs in some year in Chobamber came with Charles and here are in the Kamala here, Tata Kijikawas, Lama Tratop, then the Konamia to Baton, Tan Dorna, Garegazan, take the carriage on Gareg, take the carriage on the counter, and so okay, you suck from your ham or the Mihiti Gina, Sonam Tosan, Mikisonam Tosan gave you about to the Charles Sadi, Chobamber Kere. Yeah, Chazan Nan and Zudakon, any signing out on Kit and Chobamber Kim Menina, Tendri Separa, Chesa, and Dichol all the time, perroting as a regions on the Kibondo, so the Kibondo, then he draw the kid and Soba King of the God saying, Tanya and Kansani, so comes up like Loma Tamji, to two Mina, Melema, to two, Perro, when all the agents on as a Kibondo, Gapondo, then it Tendri. Tata Savian Chopamber Kimiono, Chamas, Nango, Internet, and the Jajan decided to cook as a Yasha, Nisana, and the computer not dead did now to come to.
Now he added this, and he said, I'm kind of joking, but he's also kind of not. Just for the record, so people know, he was answering a question that was submitted by a Sangha member who lives in Phoenix, in Arizona, which is several thousand miles away. The answer would be different if you were talking to somebody who lives locally. And here we go with that. While it is true, as I said in answer to that last question, that you can definitely fully take part in pujas here through the internet. that really only has full validity if you cannot get here. So, for example, he said it would be unreasonable to expect someone who lives in Phoenix to fly out for every puja here. So it's reasonable for them to take part through the internet. But I don't want this, what I said in answer to Marina's question, to be misquoted or used as an excuse for suspending local participation. Now, he smiled as he said this and laughed, so just pretend that I'm smiling and laughing. Don't think that because of what I said, and because it's easier for you to simply sit up in bed and open your laptop and watch the puja and mumble a few words of it and so on and think you're taking part, that is sufficient or the same as coming here. Because if everyone starts doing that, this place could die out. There's a story that during the early spreading of the teachings in Tibet, after Semia Monastery was built, there was an ecumenical, this much we know is true, there was an ecumenical invitation to Buddhist teachers, not just from India itself, but from other countries to which Buddhism had already spread, including and especially China. And the teacher of the form of Chinese Buddhism that came responded to that ecumenical invitation. He's usually just called Hashan, which means monk in Chinese, I think. But anyway, Hashan Mahayana, because he taught the Mahayana form of Mahayana Buddhism that was prevalent in China at the time. And in giving talks, as he was invited to do, he said, the Indian masters who have come here and taught you have emphasized the two accumulations, the conceptual accumulation of merit and the non-conceptual accumulation of wisdom. But in fact, he said, the non-conceptual accumulation of wisdom alone is sufficient. So I urge you to stop doing all these making of offerings and these things and meditate. Simply just meditate and gather the accumulation of wisdom. Now, while there is what he said is not completely devoid of truth, it had a disastrous effect. It caused, the story goes, that it caused people to stop making offerings to Sangye Monastery because they had heard, no, don't bring offerings, meditate. So they just tried to meditate rather than bringing offerings. So therefore, a disciple of Shantarakshita's, the abbot, the Kashmir abbot Shantarakshita, was invited, and according to legend, it was Kamalashila, was invited to debate this teacher, Hashan Mahayana. And the story goes that, Kamalashila won and so on. And then there's, Lama briefly mentioned, there is some concern about the actual historicity of these events because the Tunhuang manuscripts, which were found in the 20th century, put some of this in doubt. But it's a teaching story, so it could have happened. And what it means is that when we take something out of context, it can cause disaster. So don't he said, okay, that finishes the story. I have to be clear, because I know that it's harder to follow things. You wouldn't think it would, but it's actually harder to follow narratives online than it is when you're in the room. Because you don't necessarily get the same body signals by language signals by room. So the story is finished. Now back to what he's talking about. I'm concerned, therefore, that by answering Marina's question as I did, you will mistake what I'm saying to justify not coming here to pujas, and we could end up with nobody to play the drum, nobody to beat the drum here, and nobody bringing offerings to them. Yeah, and I wrote something I can't read. So that's it. Stops there.
Angela Mullins has one question. Yesterday you mentioned if you conceal something, it grows. You went on to say, conceal your virtues and reveal your flaws. Is this like being humble, or are there specific things to hide?
She knows that the Deepa, the Angela, Zukurumodola, Indiana Neva, Zukuru, Trasa, they get this. The Deepa, so Deepa Samna, Deepa Pelges. Kasi isa Gewa Samna, Gewa Pelges. Gewa Mona, Gewa Jondruges. They kind of, the Gewa, so Gewa, the Nyamchuma, the so Gewa, the Sam, Gogudes.
Dati gewa de gewa se pe josom zo gewa mampe si gewa mangu pa si zone ta gewa la tenda wa de tsaya yo de gewa se ya de ka de na mamchi si mro so de kwa na ka che na sang mro so ka tang la so de kwa de sang ma sang ne hi ya da ke sang thong bo ge go ne la men de ni xia ba ta pong ba ta da na xia yor ge la sai na tin de ni xia ba si tham na 계산 통보가 거네 그 톨로샤 즈버 소르존 샤탐나 람산다 레사원다 로송데 샤는다 되게 용데죠 게와데 몽베시 좀 멈추비니 소데 가레시는 게와데 몽나 게와데 몽보로 우상는 나자르케고 나자르텔테네 나자르테네 도 나자르 뭐 마시는 나자르 도로와 데 게와 몽베시 저 가시는 게와데 상고 소데 게와데라 parchi yung 가레시나 주반 넘버 타바를 차는 집에나 강의 주사파나 때나 되는 사퍼지 어서 다다 산제게 손분도 되바나는 손들이 되는데 개와된 어머니 손에 담보 밖에 개와된 어머니 손 강다리야 네 넘바는데 다 희고 너 창마 희고 너 창마 저도 타마리는 조랑게 예담사 가래 조랑게 니바까지 아니 조랑게 생서 상고는 상좀 매와 마히나야 양 조랑 마이지도 마치는 거 조랑 가야 마히오 조랑 가야 매와 I'm so sorry I know you know how you don't know that this second so I'm so sorry second so 그도 먼저 가서 산에 던들 게야 요 말이데 상고바데 자불라마 오네다 거기 명하다 거기 여담자다 대고 상고 성화되대 상격 말이 희거인데 마히는 그 말이 차차마데 도레스 겨 쿠마스 겨라나 희거로 참마기 희간도 가서게 희거라마도 더서 참마 상고야 그 겨리 배고야 그 겨리 참마게 미히라근도 호데 보네 라마 담기 그만지하게 하고미람나 미히람나 데랑바데 미히하고미라나 it's okay. That's fine. I ask others to love you. They know what they might hear. I hear it now. They give out the catching in the bag of the body catching here.
The saying, the understanding is that virtue is destroyed by boasting. and wrongdoing or evil is destroyed by confession. So in either case, concealment nurtures both the good and the bad. We went through yesterday the many reasons why confession is important, and that it's the basis of purification and so on. But in the case of virtue, there are two main problems with talking about the good things that you have done. One thing is that when we verbalize something, we further reify it in our minds. And so if you tell people about good things that you've done, such as what you meditate on, how many of their mantras you've said, what you practice, and so on, what offerings you made, how much money you offer to so-and-so Rinpoche, and so on. When you tell people about this, it gives rise to pride. And that's natural because we take delight in having done good things, which is okay. Delighting in the good you do is fine. But when you tell somebody else about it, because of the interpersonal exchange, that delight gets warped into pride. And it is the pride that you give rise to that at least chips away at and may completely destroy the virtue or goodness of what you did. So that's one thing. One reason is we don't talk about the good things we do so that we don't become proud. The second reason is that because wherever there are gods, there are demons. That means that when you, by talking about your good deeds, you invite obstacles. You actually, because you're challenging negativity, you're actually almost like, I dare you to challenge my goodness to negative forces, both within yourself and in the environment. So it's actually dangerous. So if you want to destroy your virtue, then boast about it. And if you want to endanger your virtue, then talk about it. Now it's very hard for people to get this in this country. Because this country is, Lama said, I'm just the messenger, don't shoot the messenger, is entirely based on self-promotion. Modesty in this country is seen as weakness, as a lack of accomplishment. No one in this country has any respect for, and very few exhibit even a particle of modesty. In this country, if you can do or know anything, you will announce it at every possible opportunity. In the best cases. The worst cases, of course, you'll announce qualities and attributes you do not possess, but that's a different discussion. Therefore, in this country, there is the perception, prevalent not only among people in general, but even among American Buddhists, that if you do not parade your knowledge of something, you are presumed to be ignorant. Now, traditionally, according to the Buddhist tradition in general, at least in Tibet, Lama said, I can't speak for all other countries, but at least in Tibet, you're supposed to deny knowledge of aspects of Dharma that you do know about. When a Tibetan Lama says, I don't know anything about that, or I don't know, an educated or intelligent Tibetan will understand that they're probably being modest. They probably do know all about that. But that's not the way it works here. Here, if you ask a Lama a question, no matter how inappropriate the question is for the venue, no matter how unnecessary or inappropriate the question itself may be, irrespective of it, if the Lama attempts to avoid the question by politely saying, oh, I don't know, then you say, oh, I'm sorry, you don't know that. I'll go to a Lama who knows me. Now he's talking from actual experience. So, in the end, teachers from countries where, let's say, let me put it in a less combative way, teachers who would otherwise know better are forced to conform to the culture by saying, yes, I know the answer to that. Yes, I know the answer to that. Although it goes against the grain for us, he said, because we were brought up differently, let's say. Any other questions?
Oh, yes. We've got a few questions here. So quickly, we're going to do Cheryl. Cheryl has a question. I live with two Christians. I thought I was not supposed to expose them to Buddhist things, so I've been chanting mantras and liturgies close to a whisper. How loud should I chant?
You thought you weren't supposed to expose who?
Expose them.
Them.
Them, the two Christians.
Who?
The two Christians that she lives with.
Oh, she lives with two Christians. Okay, I couldn't understand what you
Oh, I'm
said.
sorry.
I thought, okay.
It's,
She's, okay, she lives with two Christians, so she's been chanting mantras quietly. Well
how loud should she chant?
then. Depends on whether they got guns or not. Are they God-fearing, gun-toting Christians? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be political. I am not being political. I'm not going to get political about anything. Sorry, I slipped a little bit. I'll try not to be political. Dire, Florida de Gemo Chico, Gemo de Kongtrol ni Yeshu Paris. Chedon so de Sanjay Chitsenda, not so de so Todro Jelata, the Barete, Conso, Moso, Conso, Control Maloma, Morum, Sugar, Daggy, or Mato, Kitchen Daggers. They drink it.
Take it, Jatan Mantra, there's a Tenduton and Jacori, Chaparion, so with two, some sort of an hour, two, some matu, some and the Jatan, take Pinko.
There's nothing wrong with that. And because the fundamental rule to which you're referring, it's not so much don't expose non-Buddhists to Buddhism, it's simply don't be a nuisance to others. And one can assume that they would find it a nuisance if you were to loudly proclaim Buddhist mantras. It's fine for that reason, because you're observing the basic rule of not being a nuisance. And it's also fine for a second reason, which is that most mantras, the instruction is, they say, recite it so that only your caller can hear it. So, that means so that you can, even you yourself, can barely hear the sound of the mantra. Mantras are not required to be recited louder than that. So yes, it's doubly fine.
Matt has a question in the chat.
I can't hear.
Matt from Jamgon.
Jeff.
So recently I've been sort of going through something, I don't know really how to describe it, but basically most of the time I entertain myself, like thoughts and whatnot, because I don't like being bored, basically. So, but recently I've been noticing that these sort of tricks I play on myself, they're just not really working, in the sense of trying to fill up this space with something to do, whether or not it's positive or negative. But when I really kind of look into it, it's there's really not much there, I'm sort of creating these things, entertainment, it's just entertainment in general. And it's hard for me to kind of accept that, because this is just repeating these sort of these things, these habit patterns, mantras. And I was wondering, why is it so hard to kind of let go? I almost don't want to believe it in a way, but why is it so difficult to let go and settle it and be patient, I guess?
Tata Korang Namto Tana Namto de Bamache Chi Namto de Zoyam Gebe Namto Kamai Pena de Dizoko do Zotsu Samatonga Namto Mare de Sempa Macho again the Namye Ke Namto Pena Temo Taya Nashi Nando te dana nange temotaya gemes. In the so le lavo tong to this. They can
단 남도 세야 돼 레하고 땅고 땅이야 남도 매워서요 남도 코랑 요래 남도 매워서요 남도 조랑 짜지 감총 자 쪽에서 그 동으로 그래 그 남도 매워서야 남도가 내가 야가 안다 좋아했어야 한다 말은 그건 너무 없어야 맞춰라 라마 기다려 일단 강처럼 대 공자고는 강처럼 장이 강 남도 지구나 대 강고 가야 뭐 제죠 남도 그거 코랑 도도 파고 코랑 도도 대다 고다 먹고 야다 속에 코랑 그 양자 양소 마는데 코랑 뭐라 거는 공고다 코랑이 용가리든 로가리든 코랑이 전화가 가야 조금 말을 코랑 내처를 장기기를 남도 매봐 나서 조금나 갈래 커버 남도 매봐 조금이나 직시나 남도 파서 그 말이 남도 그 전화 철경 봐서 그 말이 남도 대대서 남도 하고네 뒤돌아 곰 뒤모죠 남도 모네 야버서네 들고다 남도 그때니 갈래티 남도 도서 초랑가 샘는 의체 가양 매와도 되니 갈래 남도 차창 검 잔조나 계제 남도 도도 저도 피다 그래마도 이렇게 그 말이 남도 들으시는 장소 거면서 남도 매와서 그거 되나 남도 미를 요 말 남도 가서는 요래 남도 자원이 좀 밀어서 요
Well, the first thing about thoughts is you can't get rid of them. You cannot eliminate thinking, because thinking is a natural function of your mind. So the first thing is that we cannot eliminate thoughts. We cannot prevent thoughts from arising. Another thing is that in addition to that, we don't have much control over what thoughts arise. The good news, however, is that we don't need to have control over what thoughts arise. The thought that we need to control what we think, what our thoughts are, is just one of those thoughts that we can't control. In fact, what we need to do is not attempt either to eliminate thinking or to pick and choose among thoughts. We need to rather learn not to distinguish between thoughts, to simply treat all thoughts as equal. That regardless of whether a thought is something that we want to be thinking or something we don't want to be thinking, regardless of whether a thought is practical and practically needed, or as you put it, mere distracting entertainment, they're equal. And the solution to thought is not to attempt to stop it and not to attempt to get rid of it. Simply look at the nature of whatever thought is present in your mind at a given moment. And as you become used to doing that, you'll discover that while thoughts, as you indicated in your question, are infinitely varied in their particulars, they are all exactly the same in their stuff, in their nature, in what they really are. So the solution is to let go of trying to get rid of them and let go of trying to pick and choose among them. But instead, to use the energy that you would use in those two fruitless pursuits, simply to look at their nature, which you can do. Because if a thought is bothering you, that means you're aware it's there, and that means you can look at it. You can look at its nature. If you try to get rid of thoughts, either thoughts in general or particular types of thinking, they may drive you crazy. So, and by the same token, Lama said, when you stop trying to get rid of thoughts, and you stop trying to control what the thoughts are, in other words, you stop trying to pick and choose, then instead of driving you crazy, they become your friends. They help you. Said Matt. Andrea, you said Matt.
That was Matt. This is Jeff. Who's next?
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, I thought you meant Matt and Jeff online.
Oh.
Matt and Jeff, isn't that a thing? Oh, that's Monk and Jeff. Okay.
And we're local. All right, thank you so much. After what you just said, it's like, maybe I'll just go home now. But Peter Elias asked me to ask a question for you. Peter Elias from Vermont. I will read his text. Lama, taking into account everything you said about Samaya this morning, and thank you very much for all of it, because it was extremely helpful in offering context to our situation. But even in light of your illuminating elucidation, I don't think I'm alone in being somewhat dismayed that the traditional teaching is that even unwittingly imbibing a morsel of food contaminated by a Samaya breaker can and will lead us to the exact same result as killing a Buddha, which is something dreadful to even say. How is this even possible?
Well, first of all, he didn't say that. That's a misstatement. But well, it's The question is phrased to be polemic, so, and therefore performative, but we'll respond. I'm not blaming you, you're just the messenger, I'm just the messenger too, but I'm a messenger with attitude at the moment. Did it? Peter Elias and Gipoyan Mimba, Hosea Mimba, Gidisa, Latin, climate. The Jesus. Kasonge, Soba Nashi, Lena, that damn she's the Mopo, it's a Lusha. Dama, Kasonge, Soba, the Dembayena, the Zekam chip, the Damyam chip, down, Zekam chip, young the Zana, Dorje Drakpo Tsal, then it's also rangi dikpa kaya mazo shilu sanjay musu sepata ledu uchipado chakis. Dama the dikpa chishu de sanjay dama. That's sanjay dama sigma. The dana zaming nagi. The level the Saming Nata, the Debuchipa Chagas. There it is, the Departments.
Talo, se kamji sugana Dordinya, Jino, the Leka, Labio Mari, se kamji, Tamji, Tamyang, Tamdepo, the takes a Tamsi China songs on the set, Kala, Tosin, the Tamdepo, so Geva, this are a partition creator, della tiene tortigna di dietro le lavori che cosa tu sei a te sare ma si ma sono ya lavori tortigna dietro le lavori ti mia lavori ti facciare ti la mia figlia non lavori canta ya chebo mari dadanti damse ko che già che ya de so che siano Dapa yunda so che tenrike che tamse chanya kan rimi so che tamse zama zanja dela nonggo ya da trago ya da dela disiko ya de kimchi yo mari tanga so de tamse traya de porte marang tunga mari ngarang ke ngaso ke ti sanje tamje ki chu ngoro no che ke simki tham che la me jewa chimbo ko sangha ka chu de ke che la ni che wa ke chewa de ni chewa yo ba de na ma so chama ke sangha chonyo monyo de to sangha chongra de sangha lobo de ro ri sang ni ke to ba de de tam che ma bo ke sung sa ma bo ke de o de ke na so da song dorje ko thong na ki cha ko de ma de nu ko ma ri de la de da so ke lama dorje lobo ko da do wa da ni se ke chan je ba da sa je do la so saming na da so ma na ki se ya mi na dorje nya wa se ya de ro Garesa, take a thunder poker is here, Yawan Bonders here, that's all. Read lesson.
I'm just going to check the text so I can say for sure it's not in the text. They also Sanga Chitansi Yambe, so Rangi Dansi Yambe. Say there in the Dopadoma Chit, Lam Lapa the Chete, Virginia, Sanga the Dova, Sube, Kinishan the Chili, Cherry, Sube. All right, Mr. Peter Elias. Mr. Peter Elias, you misquoted me. He's saying, Okay, so what Lama said was, I did not say, and I'm quite confident that this text of Lama Yeshe Gyamtso, including Jamgon Kongtrul Lodro Thaye's commentary, does not say, and I'm going to read it, the relevant section to you later, just to make this clear. I did not say, and the text does not say, that if you share one morsel of food with a samaya breaker, you will go to Vajra hell. What could be said, however, is that if you keep company with a samaya breaker, it will bring obstacles to your practice. Now, however, at that point, Lama said it's very important to avoid glib distortion of what I say. He said glib and willful distortion, where you almost intentionally misunderstand and exaggerate what you hear for the sake of a soundbite or a dramatic performative question, is something to be avoided, so he said. That's just an aside. But returning to the real issue, this stuff, this section of the text to which you're referring, is not trying to get you to live in a state of fear. It is not trying to generate a state of paranoid fear and anxiety. It is trying to bring home the extreme power, the great profit, and therefore great danger. Kenyan Chiwa, great profit, great danger. And I give the Tibetan because I know how this works. If you don't like what you hear, step one is going to translate. So the Kenyan Chiwa of secret mantra. And but that being true, it is not said here, and in a moment you'll hear what is said here, translated, that engaging in the casual interaction with a samaya breaker, such as sharing one morsel of food, will have the same karmic repercussions as the 5 actions of immediate consequence, such as maliciously drawing blood from the body of a Buddha, killing an arhat, killing one of your parents, causing a fundamental schism, and so on. No, if you do those, then you will go to, because they're actions of immediate consequence, you go to hell right after physical death without a bargain in between, which is what immediate consequence means. Now, for the sake of clarity, to read the sentence in the commentary, which is being brought up in this question. About this, through violating the samaya of secret mantra, you will give rise to undesirable circumstances and experience many undesirable circumstances and experiences in this life. This impairment or violation will obstruct your path, and it is said you will pass directly after death to Vajra hell. Therefore, secret mantra is of great profit or benefit and danger. So notice the relevant point, it says, if you impair samaya. It's not saying that those severe consequences will be brought about through sharing one morsel of food with a samaya breaker. next.
I just wanted to thank Lama and Lama Yeshe for this teaching. I find that it's very overwhelming, so I'm taking lots of notes, and I'm trying to read my notes, and I don't understand my notes. So I'm going to try to ask a question because I want to take this opportunity to try to clarify perhaps one thing, but everything else is kind of swirling around in my head. You were talking about enhancement, which would be the removal of the impediments, and it was one
No,
of
those are two different things. Just to clarify before you, I do mean to interrupt. Saying I don't mean to interrupt would be a lie. Removal of impediments was the previous fourth section, which we concluded yesterday. And enhancement is separate from it. One is like protecting the growing crops, and the other one is like in the analogy, making sure that they continue to have the resources they need to continue to grow.
Thank you, Lama. So in my notes, it was talking about, there was a first translation by Guru Rinpoche's words of outer, inner, and then secret. And then for outer, we were talking about situations, people, things.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a discussion at one point of attitude,
Mm-hmm.
and how attitude is critical with these outer relationships.
Mm-hmm.
When did we talk about the inner, when we started to go talking about attachment, aversion, and
No, we're still in the section of outer. We haven't finished the section of outer. In fact, we have two more outer sections to go. We have a section on the using the relative truth, interdependence, to bring outer enhancement, and using the emptiness, absolute truth, to bring enhancement. And all of that's within the section that's called outer or external enhancement. So we're not done with outer. We didn't get to inners.
Okay. Then I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
사실 상상 팽이도 상상 고몽도.
subject jata subject soma te hamo.
It is an attribute of Tibetan religious scholarship that there are extremely detailed outlines or headings, structures to the text, as detailed as we would find, for example, in the legal codes in Western countries, and for the same purpose, for the purpose of clarity. But by the same reason, if you don't have the text in front of you, the very detail of the outline starts to make it all the more bewildering.
Jack is gonna ask a question.
And then,
So first off, I have utmost respect and love for both of you, but.
oh, here we go.
But first making but.
But you know I would love the questions. So I have two lines of questions, but I'll start with the maybe easier one. And maybe drop the second one. So yesterday you were talking about how important it is for us to understand what you're saying and understanding the puja when we're doing our purification.
Mm-hmm.
And how important it is that we say it out loud.
Mhm.
And I find it very difficult to do both at the same time. And especially because oh, really, I'm so loud? Okay, I'm closer now.
He's never happy with distance of microphones. I mean, he's gonna like, it's just a thing.
So lucky, yeah.
And we know it, and that's why we will torment.
We love you so much.
Everybody else, we all love Jeff. We like him really hard.
So modest.
Okay.
Easy on my
Okay. So I find it very difficult to do both, especially since I really, no worries that I will stop coming because I really like drumming.
Okay.
But then I have drumming on top of it.
Yes.
And when I practice at home,
Yeah.
I practice in English.
Mhm.
And then I lose, so then when I come here, I lose track of, the changing in the music and the chanting rhythm
Mhm.
means nothing to me with the understanding because that's not how I do it at home.
Of course.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's not much of a but. I mean, you didn't really
Oh, I
need to
see.
proceed that with the nice
Yeah,
part.
the
That's
second
pretty. That's hardly a hostile
second
question
question.
by our standards. I mean, we could. Come on, Kathy. We can do better.
The second question.
All right. Let's start with that. The 가성 송송. 지도자 감독이 자택 도서나. 대초 영화계 donda so cheap then also get dance yamcha jawa pigs. Dance yamcha sushin jawa chitana also get donda the choga get six more the donda shifu. Donda shishin nying shapo nying tower get sick donda some toma so donda that also get some tong shin the dong yang song yina yang go congo sana not it a jong be like choga jerkom yapo ke dong ini shubar kaya rasa member also ke nyam so yang chi din chi the jerkom the jerkom Lama Tratop kitchen or job. That mola colors, mola downhill. The machine the yana, not so choga downhill castle, in get under lona, kale lona, do not shake. They penguins, do not share the penguins. In an in lona, the pig, nyamdu don't. Yana pay jade de lone de done to this. Done that lock this. Nisana the Nemoran Giteso and the Moncho not done. That not done what cheap. The name catch about do not share about them something. So now you that nama did the sosa and yamanzo the lobby. The Engi choga chipo, the top choga chipo, the done Engi ke chapo jaya, the kechapo jaya, done that share the Dunyami. Shenda ke like a Mardonia down the Zombs. Correct?
Tell Lena, yes, we love you too. But answer again. Yeah. Tela tapioris. Tela categories in the demaris, Tonda de Hakoya, the packaging body. And not don't do Yege for Yege Latena, not for They are Hobjang. Tezare dele mangsaro nangyong zigana na de rangi kalaba koranke chorwara ke nam hire ke jandone chorange yegela hidasa no to mugo de triki sangru jores Charanzo music, the sang yong ki or dancing talking, dancing the singing yiga, Kabli Zawani, me Tom Recorded, music donkey, not Donyata, Rocha Donyata, singer say, and Kabli Zawani, me on Rotoperis, then Rotoperis, they said Sacha people is, Sacha Mabi, and Yonkamaris. Nini Jat Kija Dona, Pinker is a Jatic Gares in the Jatic on the Sud Giant and Asoka Nag Jasanski, don't call it dinner, don't on the Yabo. The Donda de Nika Hinjek and Rotokamari, Choranga, Soban Solipuna, Donta Renila, Dabjota Tonjonika, Tao in the Jacobian Sugana, Donda the Chatan Levana, Panchi get the joke toppery. Then the Drat, the Donda, dying and some Yingo the chat toppery. They said, Fabian is over the kitchen on South Doesn't young. Then you want those that they pay up on those.
I have a feeling this is gonna lead right into question two.
I hope so. I hope so,
But we're
because,
gonna run out of time because it's 3:50 stuff.
no, Kathy, you and I can make time stand still with our question and answer. We can,
You and I can, but we have time.
we got this. Yeah, but, and then he gets stuck in the middle. There is a way that you can approach this issue methodically. You're talking really about three elements here: the drum, the Tibetan sounds, and the English meaning. So the drum you play with your hand and arm, sometimes hands and arms, but it's mostly just one hand. And the more used you get to playing the drum for these rituals, you'll find the less you need to think about it. And therefore, the less of your conscious mind it will take up. So just the way, for example, you can dance to music without having to think about it much, unless you're learning a new form of dance. So in that way, we can eliminate the drum from the discussion, first of all. The drum is kind of an extra here. So the issue at hand is you want to make noise. You want to chant out loud in Tibetan because you're in a group where it's being done in Tibetan. But you want to know what it means. That's really what we're talking about here. And as you pointed out, you can't read the translation while you're chanting the Tibetan. The solution is study the translation for a week or two before the week of the puja. Study it between sessions or beforehand, and familiarize yourself with the meaning. Once you're familiar with the meaning from studying the translation on your own, the Tibetan should remind you enough, because should remind you enough to bring the meaning to mind. Sorry. So that was his answer. I've looked at I've looked at the texts, the liturgical texts that we use here. And of course, this involves 3 lines for every line, right? You've got the Tibetan, then you have the transliteration, the Tibetan sounds in Roman letters. And then you have the translation. But the people who make the texts try as much as they can to keep those together, so that the translation is directly below the transliteration, which is directly below the Tibetan original. Now, the significance of this is the way visual memory connects with meaning. When you read text in your native language, in your case English, in my case Tibetan, if you read it and study it, you'll remember not only the meaning, but you'll probably remember roughly the position on the page. For example, when we want to look something up in the book, we often know where to find it because we remember what part of the page it was on. So similarly, if you study the English translation by reading it repeatedly during, between sessions or before, when you get to that part of the page, not reading the English, reading the Tibetan that's above it, or the transliteration that's above it, during the ceremony, that should automatically bring up the memory of the translation, the memory of the meaning.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think you did it.
Great. Thank you.
Are we out of time?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
right.
we are
There's
10
been
minutes.
so much more, but
Yeah,
anyway,
we are very excellent. Excellent weekend. So we keep Johnson weekend. Naranga Ganshi the Monetane Hibari, Ganshi the Hibari, then it's all on my Jori, Janza Pehale Pajak, Kotori, did the package and what it does. Jodo Gone, Yani Sugana, then money to the Churchill Karemato Magon, Kaya Yokamarina, Chuta Kaza Kahari, but the Ritz Kaza Kahari. Gomna Tinagi, Chayo, Nima region of Gom teaching, thing around Molam Yapokyo, thing around Getzewa, Molam Yapokyo, thing around Machi, Machi, and Ron Norva, Chevata, Mangareke, Central Mati, but Yusefari, Kanza Marella, Senat Sonare Ori, Sanjeka, choose on the Ganza Nagar, the song of the Riki Samjet Nagar, song of the Rela. Sonare already, go already, send a team with you already. The Notor Sona, Tang Maranka Notora Mari, Kanta Yangana, he Jabari, then the Jaran Sola Maranga, Munia, Toloka Super Soya, and then Kuro Sama Tamji, then Jimaya Jarjalika, Monam you, then also Sama injected up, Matu the Yaniso at the PK Mori, then in Monam Chokai, Trash Taylor.
This weekend has gone extremely well. As always, I've tried to honestly and frankly tell you what I know about the subject. Lama Yeshe has translated it so that you have been able to understand what I'm saying. As always, I want to leave you with my encouragement that you actually meditate. Remember that only the actual practice of meditation can enable us to bridge the gap between Dharma and our minds. Somehow, as long as we don't practice meditation, no matter how much we hear or how much we know, we remain separate from the message of Dharma. So I urge you to meditate. If I've made any mistakes in what I've said, I apologize for that. And also, I apologize if I have, said the wrong thing at the wrong time. There are 3 situations that are possible. You can just be wrong in what you say, like it's not true, or you can be right and helpful. And there's a third situation, which is where you can be correct but not helpful. And so I apologize for anything I've said that has been incorrect or technically correct but not helpful.
Okay. Oh, so long, dear, Tashi, Zequani, Tona, Yebe, Rana, Bonze, Chica, Nade, Bala, Rova, Sebe, Zole, Rova, Rova, Yo, Kiva, Dei, Chivo, Sona, Yiki, Zozo, Sona Yije Lezawe Tamba Gani Toba Yo Swajo Sene Rinpoche Paji Pana Jijo Jiba Nyamba Mibada Goni Gondu Pewa Yo Simji Tamji Dena Deja Gino Tamji Tada Tomboy Sanjo Samba Ganda Zayo Teta Ganje Mola Rava Yo Sanje Rege Zunze Name Ga Jagan Jaya Dada Nemai Sanje Mezon Reve Sanga Sinye Sanda Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for the near all my Dharma friends.